Good evening. This Public Safety Building Committee meeting Monday, May 7th, 6:30 PM. It's actually 6:32 PM. I'll call the meeting to order. It looks like Ms. Cook, Mr. Moorhead are, I do expect them, but they are not here currently. First item on the agenda is approval of meeting minutes from April 5th, 2018. Are there any comments on the minutes that were circulated by Mr. Lyons? Okay. All right, with that, I'll make a motion to approve the minutes as presented for Thursday, April 5th, 2018. Is there a second?
Seconded.
Seconded by Mr. Berry. All those in favor? Any opposed? And one abstention, Mr. Rooney. Okay. The next was the meeting minutes from Monday, April 9th, 2018. This was the pre-town meeting discussion. I had two comments. One was we should just indicate the actual room that we were in at Trotter.
109, 131.
Yeah, just go back to the posted agenda.
Okay.
And the last bullet point, I don't know, it says the selectmen would like to reject, add alternate number 3 and continue with RFQ for solar canopies. They didn't make any motions that night, so my suggestion would be to strike that and refer to their meeting minutes for that particular meeting, seeing as we're guests at their meeting. Are there any other suggestions, edits? Okay, so I will make a motion that we accept them as adjusted for my two edits. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Goodney. All those in favor? I got, any opposed? And I have a few abstentions due to absence. Okay. All right. Moving forward, I had mentioned at a prior meeting that our terms expire on June 30th. The Board of Selectmen at their, I believe it was the April 11th meeting, had asked me to poll the interest of this committee in terms of continuing. I did hear back and respond to the Board of Selectmen that all 9 members would like to be considered for reappointment. They haven't taken any action on that, but the goal of that was, should a member not want to continue, or should the Board of Selectmen have not wanted to reappoint one of us, that I had asked them to go through a process now before we actually physically broke ground at the site, just to make sure that the building committee was intact and ready to go to supervise kind of the construction process. So I also indicated at that time that I thought it was important that you know, I was elected as chair when this committee was formed. Mr. Goodney was elected as vice chair, and Mr. Lyons was elected as clerk. We're not entitled to those positions, and I think now is the right time to decide who will kind of lead the process going forward. Because I don't know that that we should be going back 2 months into the construction process and kind of swapping out roles. We have about 14 months to go, assuming that were reappointed as part of the BOS reappointment process. So with that, I have every intention of kind of calling for an election of chair, vice chair, and clerk. So I guess I'll pause there and see what the general appetite of the committee is in terms of proceeding down that route.
My thoughts are, if it's not broke, don't fix it. If you guys are willing to continue your roles, I'd nominate the same people.
That's my thought too.
We'll have your little election if you want it, but you're not getting out of this.
What's the matter?
There's 3 roles. Okay. In fairness to Mr. Lyons, because while I definitely have homework to do to prepare for these meetings, he obviously has homework after the meetings to make sure the public's aware of what happened, especially when these meetings aren't taped. So are you willing to continue in your role?
Yeah, I'll keep on.
You've
Okay.
done a great job, John. Thank you.
Yeah.
All right. So Mr. Wood, you're the one that,
I'm making a motion to nominate Mr. Malinowski as return as chair, Mr. Goodney as vice chair, and Mr. Lyons as clerk.
Okay, is there a second?
Second.
All right, seconded by Mr. Officer. Any further discussion? All those in favor? All those opposed? I'm going to abstain, and I saw an abstention for Mr. Goodney as well. Okay,
Yeah, you're never getting away from that role, kid.
I appreciate the vote of confidence, but like I've said many times, you know, there are rules, and I just want to make sure that everyone has a chance if they shall desire to sit over here. All right, so moving forward, we have invoices for approval. I'm seeing one invoice from the Vertex companies. This is actually for their March time in the amount of $20,677.85. Is there any questions for Mr. Lemieux on the invoice that was presented? Okay, I just like, before moving this, I just wanted to basically call that they're running approximately $40,000 to $50,000 below their estimated budget for this. So they've because this is one of our only rates and hours contracts on this, I just wanted to thank them for being diligent with how they are spending their time and not overexerting themselves or underexerting themselves into certain situations. So with that, I'd like to make a motion to approve. Oh, Mr. Rooney had a question.
Yeah, I just had a question, Jason. The supporting documentation I have has a total of 11,786 for the March work. And I was just wondering where you got the 20 number from.
I'm reading from the invoice summary. Oh, is this, I'm reading from the wrong date. I'm sorry. Well, actually, I'm reading the invoice that we approved last time, March 12th, on the invoice summary. The new one is down at the bottom. I'm reading the wrong column. So so it's really the 11,786, which is then supported by the invoice that was in the packet. Thank you for keeping me straight over here. All right, so with that, I'm going to make a motion to approve the invoice dated April 13th, 2018 in the amount of $11,786.00. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Seconded by Mr. Goodney. All those, any further discussion? All those in favor? Any abstentions? All right, motion carries on that. The next that was included in the packet, so similar process to what we've done in all of the months, because Vertex can't approve their own invoices as owner's project manager, they then submit on behalf of all the other contractors working on this one packet. So just for the public's benefit, there's 3 items in this for approval. One relates to the water main line design extension for $12,775. Fuss and O'Neill for site plan review in conjunction with the planning board, $2,590. And Eversource Energy for $68,770.48 for the gas main extension. Vertex has recommended approval of all 3 invoices for a total of $84,135.48. Are there any questions for Mr. Lemieux on the invoices that were presented?
Does that gas cover everything under our 100,000?
It's a great deal. You get to prepay for all the work.
We get to, but but we thought we'd pay 100, right? I mean, that
did.
was our budget number.
We did.
Right?
Yep,
Okay.
yep. So it came in under budget, which is great.
Yep.
Any other questions on what was presented? All right, I'll make a motion to approve the invoices as presented. Is there a second?
Second.
Any further discussion? All in favor? Any opposed? All right, motion carries unanimously. All right, Chairman's update. I have a few items. So on May 1st, as many of you know that were there, we officially broke ground on the complex. The groundbreaking was very, very well attended. I'm sure some of it had to do with the phenomenal weather that day, but I just wanted to thank, basically the townhouse staff for coordinating that. And basically every seat was filled and there was a good standing room audience. So I think it was a great show of support from the community and numerous other boards and committees that really helped to facilitate the process, not to mention some of our consultants sitting in the front row that have been so helpful through this process. So just wanted to send my kudos on that. I had an initial meeting with Jeff, so we're introducing another Jeff into this process from CTA Construction, so.
Start using last names.
Mr. Hazelton from CTA, who was the general contractor that was awarded, more just as a informal meet and greet, and kind of walk him through,
It's Hazelwood.
Hazelwood, thank you. What the town had, pretty much educating him on what it took to get to this process and get to kind of the award, because I think understanding kind of the desire of the residents, right, and what led to the 92% town meeting support, I think is important for them to know as they operate going forward and not just get going. So, so far, I think there's been a good line of communication. Obviously, the day-to-day will be managed by Vertex, but it was nice to kind of see, put a face with the name and the company. So I think more to come on that in Mr. Lemieux's update. I also, on April 26, 2018, received a letter from Robert Gustafson, the head of school at the Fay School. It was addressed to me, so I thought it was important that I read it into the record for the committee, and I'll also mention who it was copied and kind of any actions that came out of it. It said, "Dear Mr. Malinowski, I was pleased to receive an invitation to the groundbreaking ceremony for the Southborough Public Safety Complex on May 1st, and I look forward to attending. Fay School has supported the creation of a new public safety facility since the time the project was first proposed. In September 2009, I wrote to the Municipal Facilities Committee expressing the school's interest in contributing $100,000 towards this important initiative, and I reiterated this offer in a letter to the Board of Selectmen in July 2015. Copies of both letters are enclosed for your reference. My purpose in writing today is to state once, it says one again, but I think it means once again, Fay's sincere interest in providing our financial support for the public safety complex project and to reaffirm our intention to honor our pledge as originally proposed. Please let me know how the town wishes to proceed. Sincerely, Robert J. Gustafson, head of school." Included the two previously mentioned letters. I actually have the hard copy here now too. Copy to Dan Kalenda, Chair, Board of Selectmen, Mark Purple, Town Administrator, Ken Paulus, Chief of Police, and Joe Morrow, Fire Chief. So I just wanted to read that into the record. I have asked Mr. Purple in conjunction with the Board of Selectmen. We have no authority to act or receive money on the town's behalf, so I've asked them to take this up at a duly appointed meeting of how they'd like to respond to this generous request. Any questions? And finally, at the April 11th meeting, the Board of Selectmen approved a change in our charge. It has since been posted by the town clerk on the town's website. It was basically to refine our roles to more or less oversee construction as opposed to now, as it previously said something along the lines of overseeing the hiring of an owner's project manager and the hiring of a design. It also included removal of our 3 ex officio members, the town administrator, chief of police, and fire chief, not because they weren't great contributors to the process, but to allow them to participate and report back to this committee on the daily construction activities to maintain accordance with open meeting law. So the board acted on that, so going forward, we won't need to denote them in the minutes as absent or present. Any questions on Chairman's update? Okay, Owner's Project Manager update. Mr. Lemieux?
Thank you. Well, we're finally getting to the fun part. So as Jason alluded, we've executed a contract with CTA effective May 1st. That allows us to have the contract completely aligned with the bid documents, the way they were put out. It has a Phase 1 substantial completion date of August 15th of this year, and a Phase 2 substantial completion date of July 1st, meaning the station is available for beneficial use and occupancy by July 1st of next year. So that's great. As Jason said, we had an informal meeting with Jeff But we have our first formal meeting tomorrow. Tomorrow morning is the pre-construction meeting at 8:30. It's being held over at the fire station, and that's really the first official meeting with the contractor. In the packet, you'll see, later on, you see the agenda that Context has put together. It's pretty exhaustive from one end to the other. It basically lets us talk to the contractor about, expectations, about, it's the last thing in your packet if you want to take a peek. Who the team members are, communication, the status of the contracts, bonds, insurance, all of that, which we all have at this point. We'll talk about when our job meetings are going to be, and that's probably one of the most important things that comes out of that meeting is when are we meeting regularly moving forward on that. Everything that we need from them prior to the start of work, including their schedule.
One thing that was added to that,
Okay.
that came out while we were in the meeting, is we added the conservation and planning board requirements to this, so we'll talk about that as well.
That's my next item.
Sorry. No, it was added to the agenda, it's just not in the one that you have in front of you.
Yeah, no, not a problem at all. We go through, utilities, the submittal process, coordination with owner vendors, because obviously there's a number of vendors on the project where we're gonna have people coming in and doing work at some point. We talk about the application for payment process, which for this committee, just FYI, the contract says that by the 25th of the month, they have to get us what's called the pencil rec. That's basically their ask for the month. At that point, Vertex will go through it, Context will go through it. So by the end of the month, 5 or 6 days later, we have the official rec, and then at that point, we have 15 days in which to pay them. But by the time it comes to you, it's already been vetted by both of us to make sure that we're good with what they're asking for. We'll take them through procedures regarding requests for information, supplemental instructions, requests for proposal, pending change orders, construction change directives, claims if they have them, what we require of them for prevailing wages, the payroll records we expect to see from them, talk about substantial and final completion, and then ultimately close out of the project. So it'll be a pretty, I don't want to say substantial meeting, because a lot of this is business, and a lot of it's just them hearing it for the first time. And then all of that, is in the record. A lot of this obviously is in the contract as well, but we want to state it and make sure they don't have any questions, and go through it all. So again, that's tomorrow morning at 8:30. Anybody who wants to come is welcome. Let's stop for a second. How are we handling
That's a item on our agenda
So
for
we'll
discussion
get-
as a committee.
We'll get to that in a
later.
minute. Okay. So, as was just said by Jeff, obviously, we have some planning requirements that were part of our exhaustive process of getting through planning. Two of those items were a letter being filed by CTA. That has happened. That went in, I believe he filed that either today or yesterday, or the end of last week. Also, the test pits, there was some discussion about the test pits, who's going to do them. At this point, we're gonna do them. We're not gonna wait for them to get on site and then do them, because ultimately, we would like them to be ready to go. Jared, the project manager for CTA, anticipates being on site within the next 2 weeks. So we want these things done, put away, so that when they get here, they can hit the ground running. One of the things that we are jumping around a little bit here, but one of the things, they want, it's their goal to better that phase 1 date of August 15th, and get it done sooner. And in our discussions with them, as long as golf stays open, we said, tell us what you want to do and have at it, and get moving. So, their first comment back to us is, why do we have to wait till August 15th to get the septic done? I'd like to have it done in the first 30 days. Great, wonderful. You want to do it and can do it, then let's jump right in and do it, because it only saves time and gets the building in the ground sooner,
Yeah,
during this kind of weather.
They're racing hard to try to avoid extra costs during the winter to build. Want the building to be enclosed, or at least as enclosed as possible.
So, those two planning items are, There was one other, if you want to talk about the additional
so-
Concom item.
Conservation, in their order of conditions, had a requirement for a certain amount of pitch or slope on one of the roof drain pipes leading to the detention basins. And because of the elevation of the detention basin and the outflow of that pipe, the engineer calculated all of the requirements for slope and where the pipe was coming to and going from, and realized that it just technically wasn't feasible, that the bottom of the pit would be at what they expect the groundwater level to be, which is not allowable for their stormwater. So we are submitting a letter, and we're working with Beth on that issue. We expect it to be administratively reviewed and hopefully approved for a waiver from that requirement. It was put on after the sort of terms of the order of conditions were negotiated. It was added on at the end and then got in there. And so we don't think there's really not much to it. It's really just the pitch of a pipe, changing it to be a little bit steeper. But at the end of the day, we can do it in one area, we can't do it in another area, just because of a technicality of the distance you have to go. So we don't think it should be an issue, but we do have to file a waiver to get them to waive that requirement. So that's in process right now.
Okay, that's all I have under the update. We've got a lot more in these items that follow. So does anybody have any questions on what we've hit so far?
Mr. Rooney, looks at you.
Sure.
Just for my own edification, CTA, have you worked with them before?
Both
Yeah.
of us have.
Yeah, we
Okay,
both
and-
have.
And what should we keep our eyes on, if anything?
We just finished with the exact same project team, almost the same building in Situate.
Okay.
So we have a good feeling for them, how they work. We had a great experience with them.
Timeliness?
No
What about
issue.
their sensitivity to neighbor issues?
All very good.
You know, was the Situate development at all similar to this insofar as there's a neighborhood in the area? I assume there was an
There-
active golf course.
There were
but-
neighborhoods, so this, but the Situate building was on 3A, much like, being on 85. And it had abutters on two of the three sides. The third side, the northern edge of the property was, we'll call it conservation land, but there's a neighborhood behind.
Yeah,
And
because I think it's,
there was a neighbor right across the street who,
yep.
kept them honest.
Well, I think it's important for you as our representative to make sure that they understand that really the reason that this got over 90% vote at town meeting was because of an accommodation and understanding about the butters and the open space and the maintenance, the continued maintenance of the golf course. You mentioned in one of your comments, almost a qualifier, so that the golf course can stay open. The golf course has to stay
They
open.
understand that.
Okay,
They understand that. In the email he sent me today,
all right.
condition number 18, he
Yeah.
understands.
Well, I think that should
Gotta stay
actually be
open.
condition number one. That really needs to remain
Oh, no, but that's what
open.
it was numbered on the
Okay,
plan.
All right.
They-
That was a requirement of the bid, so
All right.
there's
Yeah,
no.
I just
no,
want to
they
make sure
understand
you
that.
stress that as our representative.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Let me just interject on this. I don't think you did full justice on what their plan is. They're trying to accelerate and get the septic in by probably before the kids actually leave school, so that the second school ends, they can flip it. So they have 45 days plus for if something went wrong, to fix it and have that school operating. But as part of that, it also includes the CPC funding for the retaining wall and parking lot. So by the end of golf season, the golfers are actually gonna be using their, what I'll call permanent facilities going forward, not temporary facilities, is really what comes out of this plan. So, as a golf supporter, I would think that their plan actually accelerates things, and it's, getting this project moving so that we don't have time delays down the road. So I think it's kind of a win-win.
Yeah, so we, also too, I included a couple of the sketches that we got from Jared in the packet. We need to sit with him and talk about those. I gave them to you so you can see them, kind of more as a preview of what will be discussed tomorrow morning at the pre-con. But you know, they've obviously put some thought into it. We want to make sure their logic is good, obviously, before we say yes to anything. But ultimately, you know, if what we've told them in our first meeting is, you know, as long as you can do it and you not impacting anything, yes, go for it, you know. But we'll make sure, of course, that everything is up, protected, you know, there's separation between public and construction, you know, that's, safety is number one. So we'll make sure all of that's happening before we, you know, would let them start digging.
So, once this gets finalized, I think this is the important phase where we need to optically have this stuff out on town website. So, once that gets finalized and the appropriate stakeholders, can you make sure that that gets back to us in an electronic format?
Absolutely.
Mr. Rooney, did that conclude your questions on Mr. Moorhead?
I just have one, you guys might want to talk about. They show golf access through.
We're gonna get to phasing. It's a future agenda item.
Okay.
I just wanna, specific to anything Mr. Lemieux updated us on. I'm gonna go back and forth with him a few times based on how we structured this, but, and then I guess just one thing I'll point out is because the CPC funding of the parking lot and the retaining wall is so early on in the process, I had a email exchange with Ms. Gillespie as chair of that committee, just to make sure that they understood the requirements in terms of the 15-day approval, because, right, our general contractor will be conducting that work. So it was a very collaborative email, and I think we have a very good process in place to make sure that any funding that's specific to CPC, that we're following all of their rules, but it's not going to hold up the overall payment, because there's only one check really
One payment, right.
being cut to CTA.
But those two alternates will be listed separately on the schedule of values because they were bid separately. So it's easy to see which item they're doing work on and approving at a time.
So that concludes owner's project manager update, but I imagine you're gonna have a lot to say on the next one, which is project budget updates.
Yes. Okay.
So
we'll
just before you go through this, just the context of why we're going through this is, I always laugh when I say context with you guys. So we obviously got the bid results in early April. There was a process, the Board of Selectmen approved it, but there's obviously a lot of other lines other than the actual core construction contract that went to CTA. Obviously, that's the largest. And what I really asked Mr. Lemieux to spend some serious amount of time penciling out and being as transparent as possible is, you know, what items were included in that contract. That goes against that number. There are certain items that were in the construction estimates that we had been using, but were not in the bid documents on purpose because they were going to be procured separately. So really cleaning this spreadsheet up so that it really is something that we can post on a monthly basis as we approve invoices and kind of show, you know, transparency around the project. So, you know, he's taken an initial cut at it for tonight, and I'll let him walk through it. But I think, you know, that I was really pushing for this, and I think this is really a very important spreadsheet, not only for this committee to own, but obviously to have available, because I think at the end of the day, it'll show every invoice, every bucket, and every penny that was spent on this project. So with that, Mr. Lemieux?
Great. So we're gonna go with the easy page first. So turn to page 2, and let's just get that one right out of the way. Page 2 is a listing of the bills that have been paid to date, okay? Ultimately, there will be a column on this page for every category of item that's on page 1. So as you can see right now, we've only touched 7 of the categories. Construction is there because it's usually the biggest item. I'd make it the first column, but we have no entries yet because we just contracted CTA and we don't have a bill from them yet. But you can see, this is the listing that we got from accounting. You know, if you say, why are we starting with context invoice number 9? That's because everything prior to invoice 9 was part of the $100,000 for schematic. So these, you know, that invoice 9 was the first bill that was paid kind of on the new budget for this project. So all of those expenditures totaled down on the bottom. If you go back to the front page, those items are entered into column E. So those are the expenditures. The sum of both of those columns is $1.8 million. So you've spent $1,008,216 so far through middle of April. So that's all we'll talk about expended right now. The rest of the focus will be on the first kind of columns, A through, question?
Before you go on beyond the second page, why did we spend 15,000 on legal? What did we use that for?
You spent money on legal.
What number is that, John?
Well, I'm looking at page 2, and it looks like McGregor and Laguerre. I'm not even sure who they are.
Those got reversed out. That was,
Did those get reversed out?
those were related to the conservation restriction, if I remember the firm correctly. So I think they were supposed to reclassify those
Oh, are those
to
coming out?
the actual, not related to this project. The town still paid the expense, but
Okay.
that firm,
All
that's
right.
a very good question, because we dealt with that one, John, at the March meeting.
Okay, so that doesn't belong in here.
Correct.
Okay.
Okay. Thank you.
All right. So we've spent 0 on legal at this point, okay. All right, so basically, what I have here for you is, so the column that says CD budget, column A, this will kind of be the last time you see it, all right? This kind of was where we were before bidding. Column B is where we stood roughly a month ago, when we came in here and had our short meeting in the morning and said, okay, we have our bid results, but now we're gonna start buying the pieces and parts that we're gonna start talking about with you tonight. We've also done a series of consolidations of a certain thing, and we'll go through this kind of line by line in just a second. And we end up at column C, which is what I would call the current budget of where we stand right now. As you can see, columns A, B, and C all total the same $22,629,500, because obviously there's no additional funding at this point, barring the $100,000, which we'll talk about that separately, the grant. So, moving through, item 1 is your big, basically that's your GC line item. Before it was 17 million, we had moved it down to 14,762 on, right after bid day. It stays at that amount. But the next 4 items are basically, we'll call them write-downs, all right? Because we don't need those items anymore, or we don't need them at the level they're being held at. We had the remainder of the escalation line item, which was $56,000. So we dropped that down to the contingency. All money moves between the item it's in and the contingency, with the exception of the blue items, which we'll get to in a few minutes. The off-site gas construction, as you know, tonight we approved the invoice for that for $68,771. So the balance of that $100,000 line item moves to the contingency. The off-site water main project, we had been carrying $400,000. Bids have come in for that. The construction dollars were $211,000. The design and construction administration for that by PAR, which are those invoices we've been approving periodically, total about $70,000, which puts you at a total of $281,000, and we dropped the $119 down to the bottom. Traffic signal and control. The traffic signal was an item that we had been carrying a separate line item for, which ultimately was bid in the GC's bid. So it's carried as part of the $14,762,000. So we don't need that line item anymore either. So we're zeroing that line item out. Item 6A is a new item. That is for the builder's risk. The builder's risk is basically the property insurance for the GC. You're gonna pay this GC to build the building. If there's a fire out there, well, it's not your building yet because you haven't turned it over, but yet you've paid for it. So the builder's risk policy is basically the policy that is the property policy for the incomplete building. Once the building's complete, they hand over the keys, the building gets moved back under the town's policies, and now you've insured it. This is a separate policy for that. This was procured separately, because why pay the contractor a markup on procuring this? The town gets better rates than the GC ever could because of all the buildings you have insured. We went through this. Mark received a series of quotes. This was the best quote of the 4, I think, that we received. So basically, this is a new item, so you see it's listed as 0 in column B. We've taken $11,000 from the contingency to create this item, and now that's why you see that value under column C. For the next move, we're gonna talk about items 7, 13, and 20. Those three items together total the $345,000 for the radio budget we've talked about in prior meetings. At this point, now that we're gonna be getting close to buying radios at some point, I'm getting rid of line items 7 and 13, zeroing them out, and everything is being moved down to item 20. So as you can see, that 150,000 is being increased by 195, which is the total of items 7 and 13, to result in a total of $345,000. Everyone following that? So now when we come and buy the radios, we're gonna buy it against that one item, instead of having to spread that bill across 3 different items and tracking it that way.
Yeah, but as I look at this, number 7 looks like it's for construction of a communication tower.
Yeah,
Which we're not
we're
doing.
not doing.
Okay,
So basically, what we did is when it was decided that we don't need a tower,
we don't need
we
a
we had
construction or the design.
we had 345,000 of dispatch and radio-related dollars. So that's what we're buying. And the last estimate from Motorola before, was about 295, I think, was the last number we got. That doesn't include the, actual dispatch stations. So we're probably gonna be a little short there, and we haven't done the buy yet with Manny, because we weren't gonna buy any of this equipment till obviously we knew we had a GC contract that was within budget. It didn't make sense to commit the town to dollars we might not be able to do if the budget was busted. So we'll track all of those against that one item 20, which is now called radio and dispatch equipment.
Thank you.
No problem.
Mr. Rooney, did you have something?
Sorry, I'm just not as quick, I don't think, on this math issue, but, so you saved $195,000 in not having to do the tower, correct?
We say 150,
And then
Yeah, and-
45 for the
correct.
design,
correct.
so 195.
Yep.
And then you carry down this 195 to a new item, radio and dispatch.
It's a new combined item. It was already listed as dispatch. You already had 150,000 in the original budget.
But you're adding to that
I'm adding to it
200,000.
because the scope of the communications that you need was in the $300,000 range.
So you've taken out of one pocket 195 and put it into that pocket?
Yeah, because
Okay.
basically what I want to do moving forward is any of these items that I'm zeroing out, I don't want them to be on the sheet
Okay,
for
yeah,
the
I
next
understand.
iteration.
That-
I want to make this as clean
I
and
just
stripped
needed to make
stripped down
those
as
2
we can.
extra steps in my head to
Nope,
understand.
no
it.
problem at all. That's why we're going through it. There's only 3 other items that have any edits, otherwise they all stayed the same. Item 8, we had been carrying $1,392,000 for context fees from DD through construction administration. It's actually $1,380,000 is the value of their contract, so that $12,000 adjustment, just so that gets us in line with what the value is of their contract. And the 2 amendments that we've authorized for them so far, the $6,500 and the $22,000, those are actually on line 9 as committed costs against the $70,000. So we've committed $28,000 of the $70,000 in additional monies just in case we needed them. So you can see that that's why, if you look at context bill, their total is more than the $1,380,000. It's the $1,380,000 plus the $28,500, and their bills also show the original $100,000 as well. So just so everyone knows where the pockets are, or the buckets that their money came from. The-
Why'd that go down? Why'd they go down to 12?
Excuse me?
Why'd it go down to 12?
It's what they bid. It should have been changed previously. I mean, it's the 1380 ties to the contract we have with context.
The 1392 was a number that was there that they had given as a,
That was
Oh,
what was
budget
presented to
from-
town meeting.
Okay,
from eons ago.
okay. You never had 392, right?
No, you never had it. Right,
Okay, sorry.
sorry.
Okay, thanks.
So the biggest difference on this is item 22, security and CCTV. So basically what happened with security and CCTV, if you recall, back in the CD budget, we had said, where's the where's the security? We had been carrying it on 2, we were kind of double dipping a little bit. We got the confirmation that in the CD estimate, the estimator had carried all of the security and CCTV in that $17 million big number. And then we said, okay, great, we know what our budget is, we're moving forward. in the transition to the bid documents, the decision was made to bid that stuff directly through the state bid list, okay? Which makes sense, because why do you want to pay a markup on what's $370,000 worth of equipment? That would cost you another $50,000, you know, $40,000 to $50,000. The issue is that when we met with you on that, in that morning meeting, we didn't indicate it on a line item. So you still have to buy it. It's here. It's now listed. It's back on its own line item because it was pulled back. So for budgeting and estimating, it made sense to carry it with the GC, but in the real world application of buying it, it made sense to pull it out. So that's why that looks like such a large change right there. But as you can see, you know, I was thankful that the offsets that we've done, you know, there was minimal impact to the contingency, which is the last change, item 27. The contingency through all of these changes has decreased by $11,000. So you still have a $3.9 million contingency on the project. So as I said, this will be kind of the roadmap that we'll use moving forward. We're going to continue to do the expenditures that you see on the following page. And again, any of the items that as of tonight have been zeroed out, you won't see again. I'm going to take them out. And as we move along, we may create some other line items. We're going to talk in a minute. The next item is, a couple minutes out, is as we start buying furniture, fixture, and equipment and those sort of things, I may want to show you separate line items for some of those things, just because it's easier to track, because they are some significant size purchases. So I know it's a lot to look at, so.
Let me just, for the benefit of the public that is either here or watching, when we went to town meeting, once we finished the CD phase, we were estimating that we were gonna have $1.7 million of contingency. We're entering the construction phase, right? So putting the actual shovel in the ground with over 3.9 million of contingency,
Correct.
right? So our goal here, right, is to keep our eye on the ball and preserve as much of that as possible, because that goes back, to the residents. So my intention is to post this after each meeting going forward. To the extent Mr. Lemieux can get it a little earlier, then we'll be able to post it in advance. But the goal is then there's people can track going forward. They said they were at 3.9 on the May 7th meeting. How are they tracking against that 3.9?
One of the things that Jeff and I were talking about briefly before the meeting, and it may be something to think about, you cannot think there won't be change orders. There will
That's
be.
fair. That's fair.
Would you like to track this contingency as two line items, kind of as construction contingency, and then bid savings?
Yeah.
So so we could take that 3.9 and break it into 1.7 and 2.2. We don't touch the bid savings, it becomes kind of, it's there, we know it's there, we have it, but you could track it, I don't know, optically if you want, because you are going to eat away at this, it's construction.
We're not gonna keep getting money back every meeting.
No, this is it ends here.
Well,
I'll get a call for more meetings.
let's also keep in mind
Just a
that these
thought.
numbers don't include the 100,000 that the state has already given the town, and whatever the Board of Selectmen decides to do with the phase school payment.
Right.
So,
And we will need to pull from some of the, you're gonna hear in a minute, some of our numbers for some of the buying of furniture, fixture, equipment. Again, these are all estimates that were established a year and a half ago, and now we're actually buying these things. And we're coming close, but some are gonna come in a little under, some are gonna come in a little over. We're gonna need to, move a little bit of money around. And as we get further in the project, there will be some of the other items that we just won't use all the dollars in. That's our experience is very few of these items ever actually hit exactly. His contract, we know what it is. My contract, you know what it is. The contractor, you know what it is. All these other items, as you can see, they're gonna come in up and down. So the question is just I typically don't like to change and empty an item and bring it to zero until I know that we're done. And that's why at the top of the page, we're doing that. But for the rest of these, you're not gonna see the rest of these change or get zeroed out for for about a year until we'll have this conversation again.
except for your line item, right? Because we came in under
Already
budget
told you.
on the,
You don't have my bill for this month yet, though. We'll still come in under.
So let me, to your point, right? So the 3.9, right, is a widely publicized number in this town now, right? We're obviously excited that we did have savings on bid day as opposed to
great
eating
news.
into a contingency.
Absolutely.
But we're not satisfied yet, right? We're not satisfied until every bill is paid. So what I would suggest is you anchor to this. You've done a good scrub, right? You anchor to this 3951, and going forward, should the committee approve any changes to the 3.951 contingency, that you just have a very simple tracking sheet for those that
Oh, we
may
will.
not be as numerically inclined, and maybe that's page 3 of this.
That's exactly how we do it.
So-
We'll have a number that we'll tie to the front, and then it's usually, that contingency will track either PCOs from the contractor or movements of money to other line items. If we need to fund an item, or if we create an item, like we did tonight with builder's risk.
I think it's similar to like what advisory does in this town of, having, tracking what comes out of the reserve. This is our reserve that we don't want to touch. We realize there's going to be something.
Yep.
But obviously there could be a few more additions, maybe not to the tune of $2 million a night, but, I think that's
That's fine.
the way. I don't know, unless anyone views differently, I don't know that we need to say this came from bid savings, this is what we thought our contingency
I
was
think the
coming in.
idea, because I gave John the idea, so you don't have to take
No.
the heat. But
There's no heat, I just,
I think it was from other communities that have decided, we wanted to be able to publicize the bid savings as a separate pot of money, that we didn't want anybody to think we're attacking yet, and that this construction contingency was deemed to be needed for a construction-type project to manage the town's risk going forward. And so any money coming out of this separate pocket, if the committee were to decide to tap into it, would have to be more scrutinized, in other words, and anything coming up with just one number, there was always a confusion of, well, how much is too much and how much should we hold back against? With two buckets, it kept it a little bit cleaner in those communities' minds. But that has absolutely no bearing on what you need to do. It's really up to how do you wanna maneuver the money around, like John said. It's easy for us either way. It's just about how you wanna represent it, that's all.
I think, part of me says, if we've got a contingency in the budget and something goes over and we're kind of billing it against contingency, so to speak, I'd kind of like to keep track of that separate from the bid savings. I think that makes sense.
I agree.
all right, so
think-
basically you're gonna show that we're not touching the
Second line item.
2.2.
Yeah,
So it
Okay.
becomes, item 28 becomes bid savings, and then
yeah,
item 27 goes back to the 1,706,000.
So what happens when we don't use one of these line items that has I'll call it a nominal budget against
I'll
it?
drop it into the construction contingency.
Yeah,
So
so the
basically-
construction contingency, to use your example, is the reserve, and then the bid savings is like, the rainy day fund.
So if,
It never gets tapped unless you.
so if these additional funding sources come in, we can detail it and show, we can put it as a one-time entry and say, going to move it into, kind of almost like we do on meeting minutes. Will be moved into construction contingency if people want to see it, or I can carry it as a note below the line.
Go ahead, Mr. Goodney.
I mean, I think in the effort of transparency, if somebody just looks at this, they're gonna go, what are you doing with that big of a contingency? They don't realize that we did it through bid savings, so
Yeah.
I think if you split it up, people can look at it and go, oh, that's why. You only have two,
We can start with a format, and I think we can adjust it monthly if it's not working. My goal is that nothing shows up on that sheet, and it stay, right? I realize it's a dream, maybe not a reality, but, those are gonna be, I think, any of those buckets, I think we're gonna be looking at pretty hard.
But
Mr.
then-
Roon, do you have something?
Yeah, so I think as we leave this meeting tonight, the natural understanding in the community is that we've already saved 3.9 million. So I think you need to go out there with that expectation so that we go, once we start, if we're gonna erode that, we have to be looked at that very aggressively. My question is this, again, is there, maybe this is not allowed in the public sector environment, but is there a way to build into your agreement, your contract, an incentive such that if we save $5 million, you, on behalf of us as our representative, get a little extra. In other words, it would give you an incentive to, what?
I
you're
love how
laughing.
you're thinking.
You're
I really
laughing.
do.
We don't, because everybody on this side of the table would love that, because we think that's how we work, but in fact, it is not allowed.
Do you understand what I'm saying?
Yeah, it's not
You would
allowed.
save the town a lot of money.
In fact, the whole reason why we ended up here as OPMs is the construction reform laws. We are completely qualifications-based, we're not money-driven.
Yeah.
Because, for that exact reason.
Yeah, you can't do it in construction contracts, you can't do it in designer contracts. You
So
can't
they
make an incentive.
discourage
Not in public.
our
You
owner's
cannot- you can't use any
representative from
carrots, you can
saving
only
money
use
for the
sticks.
town.
That's how the public bidding laws
Really?
work, yeah.
Yeah,
Great in the private sector.
It works well, but,
yeah,
well, it largely works well.
can work. It can
Okay.
work.
It does work. We did save money, even just the whole canopy issue was $240,000 saved already.
Yeah,
Point.
Yeah.
I understand that.
Yeah.
Yeah, but
We don't get any of that, that's all, that's why that's why the public laws are in place, so that where there's no essentially kickbacks going back to the design team saying, well, I saved you 2 million, so where's my
no, there
piece
would
of
be a kickback going back to the residents, though.
that? Yeah, well, that's.
If you were incentivized to save the town money,
I think that,
Be-
I would say, I would argue that they're incentivized to save us money because they want the next contract
I want a
in the
good review.
neighboring
Agree.
community.
yeah,
but I would like to double incentivize them.
I think the.
No can do.
I think the reality here is that, for all of you sitting here, it's probably, you know, if we had been here at the beginning and you had said, what's a good contingency to carry, I would say 5% on a new job. Okay, so the reality here is that of your $14 million, $700,000 would be the contingency I would be comfortable with moving forward on a job of this size. So, you know, are we gonna spend $700,000? No, I hope we spend almost none of it, but you will spend some of it. But so I think the reality of having 3.9, there's no reason you shouldn't be able to say that 3 million of this is going to, you know, barring something unforeseen that we don't know that's underground right now, which is always the big, you know, the biggest thing. The hardest thing is getting out of the ground. Once you're out of the ground, if there are any issues, you know, it's, you know, it's something in the drawings, something the contractor did, it's easier stuff to figure out. The only big unknown right now is underground. And that's, once we're out of it, you know, we'll feel better. So, look, what we'll do is we'll start with a bid savings line. Anything that's going to take away from the contingency is a matter of record to talk about here. Remember, we did set up those limits of, you know, 5,000, 10,000, you know, if things come up so that we can keep the contractor moving. But we're there to scrutinize that. And I will say we had a good experience with CTA in Situate. I don't feel like we got nickeled and dimed. Sometimes you may feel it occasionally, but because if a sub brings him a charge, you know, they have a duty, if it's got any sort of weight to it, they've got to pass it on so that it goes through the process, gets addressed by Jeff, comes back through and they say yes or no to it. So I think we feel pretty comfortable with the team that we have. And we finished 3 jobs with CTA in the last 4 years, and all 3 of them were pretty favorable experiences, so.
I hate to do this, but can we go back to line 22? Because I'm not sure I'm understanding it.
Sure.
I thought I heard you say that it was originally in the general's bid,
Originally, it
then
was,
it came
no,
out.
okay, it was in the estimate, so when you look in
Okay.
column A,
Yep,
okay, the security and CCTV was in the 17,018,
okay,
all right? Sometime between when we sat here with that estimate and the job bid, it was pulled out of the general contractor's work and said, let's go after this separately. It's a
Okay.
better way to do it. The problem was that we should have gone back and filled in that line item with a number, and we didn't.
So we're doing today what we would have done in that meeting.
The
Pulled it
morning,
out
the
and put a
morning
budget
meeting,
number
the
for it.
morning meeting we had, when we sat here and said, hey, we did great. We should have said, time out, we still have to buy the security and all of that. So that number, well, we'll talk about that in a minute too, but that number is that's a number from Signet on a state bid list item. So it's, you know, we're still vetting that whole system, so we're not gonna, I put it in here as a placeholder, but if we can save money on that, we're going to try to. So we're still, I'll get to that. That's actually 2 items ahead of us. So
So just to clarify, that wasn't part of the bid package then?
no, what was
So
part,
should that come out of bid savings? technically, because
That's what we did. So that's what we did. So the reality here in this change column, the money we saved in the items up above, the cheaper gas, cheaper water, those, the no traffic signal, the removal of those items from, the reduction in those items paid for the movement of this. So, you know, when you look down at the construction contingency, item 27, the change to the contingency was $11,000 with all of those things happening. So it's covered. I mean, you need it, you've got to buy it, but we just, that's, you know, that's our miss. We should have recreated the line item for it, but the numbers haven't changed. It's, you know, and the bid that we're, not the bid, but the proposal that we received, you know, we're still vetting through that. That'll be the next meeting,
Thank you.
no problem.
Mr. Moorhead?
I just have one comment when we're talking about splitting the savings.
Sure.
Can we do the bid savings on one line, and that won't change? And our construction contingency is where we're doing the ins and out of, so all the savings that we get.
That's my plan.
Right, so I just want to,
Bid savings will stay,
bid savings stays as a line item, and it's going to not change.
you got it, absolutely.
Okay. Good.
All right.
Anything else on budget? All right, next item is solar canopy update. So I'm hoping this is one of the last times this appears in the agenda, but the Board of Selectmen refused the ad-alt from CTA with the full anticipation that this committee, in conjunction with our owner's project manager and the town administrator, will get an RFP out there to actually get the things built in conjunction with the planning board plans for these, with no cost to the town, but an income stream coming back of X dollars. So Mr. Lemieux has coordinated with the Attorney General's office to understand what, this is obviously a newer area, what the requirements are, you know, in terms of going out for an RFP. A formal RFP needs to be issued. They will draft, they're gonna work with Mr. Purple to draft the specifications, so that it's very clear that the town is expecting a no-cost bid, and really, the main item is kind of the lease terms. So I have reiterated the urgency around getting this plan solidified to Mr. Lemieux. So he's going to coordinate with Mr. Purple, and to the extent town council is required to just bring this to fruition once and for all, so that we don't have to talk about it. And in the unfortunate event that the landscape changes and someone doesn't want to offer it, that the Board of Selectmen can take whatever appropriate action it is. But that's where we stand on that. Any questions on that?
Stole all my thunder.
I guess I asked for it, so I
No,
should.
You're good,
All
you're good.
right, so furniture and fixtures, Mr. Lemieux indicated that he's gonna be using state bid list pricing. I'm gonna decide to recuse myself on this, just because I don't necessarily know what vendors he may or may not contract with. So out of an abundance of caution, to the extent that one of those vendors happens to be, you know, my accounting firm does work with them, I don't want to have any influence over that. So I'm just gonna recuse myself, step out of the room, and Mr. Goodney has offered to chair in my absence, and then I'll return once you've made any decisions on those matters.
Is there a list of potential vendors that we may be discussing? Because I may be joining Jason out in the hallway.
We're
if that's the
discussing
case.
two this evening. It's WB Mason and Donegan.
Okay.
When he says recuse, he means recuse, huh?
He does. All right, so just in general, just a quick overview. So you've heard a lot of talk over the last months about the state bid list. What is the state bid list? Basically, it's a series of vendors under a series of particular items. In this case, we're talking about office furniture. And that's what all of this stuff falls under, where it's not like there's a giant catalog somewhere in the sky where you can go and look and find a, you know, a steel case, certain desk, blah, blah, blah. What it is a series of discounts. Basically, the vendors qualify under certain parameters. Those They then set up pricing terms that say, depending on how big of what quantity you're buying of something, it steps down with what you're purchasing. So very quickly, I want to thank Chris Shanahan from Fire, who has done yeoman's work with working through this, working with these vendors to get us to the point where we are today, to a point where we can, I'm coming here to ask you for an authorization to commit dollars, and then we'll talk about how much money of the commitment. Obviously, we don't pay for everything up front, but there are some things that require down payment. We're here talking tonight about WB Mason, which is a lot of the office furniture, furniture for the police and fire, and then the Donegan quote, which is the really a lot of the specialty lockers, turnout gear lockers, a lot of the we'll call it the storage items for this. So when we got these quotes, basically what we did is called them back, and I asked them to please send us a listing so that I could show all of you kind of the breakdown from the list price to the sell price, and you'll go blind if you go through it. What I want you to know is that we've been through this, Chris has been through this. Basically, the original furniture drawings that were put out there were not, we've confirmed, these guys didn't go and order a bunch of stuff, other things that weren't designed into this building. So what you see here for furniture is what's needed. In speaking to folks, it's kind of good, solid, middle-of-the-road stuff. We didn't buy cheap, because you buy cheap, you're replacing it. We're not buying top of the line, because this price would, these prices would double. So what you see here with the WB Mason is really a breakout, and we have the cover page, which kind of gives you the totals. We're looking at $187,000 worth of furniture. You can see that it's all broken out by area. If you follow along in the part description column, you can see each room, each corridor. It's all listed as to what's being provided. You can see the extended sell price, which is not the far right column, but it's one column to the left of the far right. And, it's all in here. So basically what would happen with this is you would authorize us to commit the 187 and change to a PO. They require a deposit. Why that's important is all of this material that we're looking at here is, most of it's made out of steel. You've all heard about the issues with, potential issues with steel. We've confirmed with the vendors that even though we buy now, they're not gonna make this stuff for 9 or 10 months, but we lock in our price by doing this. Then they make it. It will then have a ship date that will be somewhere into around April or May. They'll get it into one of their warehouses and then hold it for us. There may be, at some point, if we run into any sort of issues, maybe we get hit with a storage charge, but we're gonna be walking the fine line. We're buying something that we don't need for over a year. So we're trying to benefit from the buy, but there may be a little bit of a hit later if they have to hold for us later. We're gonna try to push these timeframes as far as we can. But this is what we need in order to be able to lock this in with WB Mason. You have a funny look on your face.
I do. Who has been through this list? And I know that Chris worked on putting together what's needed for each room and making selections on what the pieces are to match the need in each room. I assume that both chiefs have gone through this, and there's a sign-off somewhere in the universe that this is what everyone thinks needs to be done, and it's signed somewhere in someone's file?
I don't know if we have an official sign-off, but we can. Both chiefs have looked at this. Chris took the lead kind of with the office equipment, or the office-type furniture, and
Thank you, Chris, by the
Chief
way.
Paulus took kind of the lead with more of the Donegan stuff, because the Donegan has gun lockers, it has a lot of that specialty stuff, so they've looked at that. As far as our side, we've looked at it from the standpoint of the original furniture drawings that were kind of gone through a long time ago and matched up, not with, obviously if you look at the current drawings, they match this list. We wanted to look back at the older list, and absent, a few chairs or that kind of detail, what's being requested here matches those older drawings when those original layouts were done for those rooms, way back.
And I do have a question, a specific question on Donegan. I don't know if you can answer it, John, but maybe someone else in the room can. I'm just looking for the Southborough Police Room, line 211A for the men's locker room.
Yep.
Is that new lockers or additional lockers? Because I thought, and maybe I'm mistaken, that those are relatively new lockers that are in pretty good shape, and they were pretty much top of the line when they were bought.
Those are being moved over,
Okay,
so this would be in addition to what they already have.
okay, thank you, that's what I needed to know.
No problem.
Look at that, got an answer.
Look at that.
All right.
That's awesome.
That's great.
We initially estimate,
Excuse me?
what was our original estimate for furniture and stuff?
Okay, so
roughly? Was
great,
it- 'cause
great.
this comes up to 300 and something thousand
No,
dollars.
great point. So when so if you look back at the budget, if you look at line 18, this item was listed at $357,000, including HD storage, high-density storage. Back in the CD phase, if you recall, we reduced the amount of high-density storage that was gonna be in the building, because the initial cost of the HD storage was about $100,000, 80 to 100,000. We discussed this, the committee discussed dropping that HD storage down to 50%. Subsequent to that, at that 50% level, Chris started getting quotes from Donegan. The first Donegan quote that came in with HD storage was $500,000+ just for the Donegan stuff, plus HD storage. Then you've got to take the WB stuff on top of it. So we were in the $650,000, $670,000 range for FF&E versus a $357,000 budget. So ultimately, the discussion was had between the chiefs to do away with high-density storage in order to try to stay within the budget. They acknowledged that for the paper storage, they would prefer the standard steel shelving to store records and get rid of the HD storage altogether. Chris then got the pricing down to the $353,000 that you see here today. So we are within budget, but there is no HD storage anymore. So, why? Why are we over? Well, I'm gonna chalk it up to, you're buying this off the bid list. This is a number from a year and a half ago that was initially put on the budget, and steel prices have started going up. There's already been one recent hit to it to vendors. That's why Donegan is on me hard to book this, because they've gotten notes from their suppliers saying it's gonna go up again. So we're already seeing a little bit of a bump. So the good news is we're under budget right now by $4,000. But it is close. And, this is most of the metal that you're gonna be buying that's in the building between these two POs. So if we lock it in, barring any shipping issues later, we're gonna try to stay away from those, but, we should be in pretty good shape and lock up a real, the other things that we have to buy, we'll talk about in a minute, but none of those have a lot of steel related in them. Those are more systems for the building, radios, alerting system, security, CCTV, all components, sure there may be some metal in them, but these are the things that are most impacted by the potential steel tariff situation we've been talking about.
Mr. Rooney, do you have a comment?
That was one of my questions. By locking this in, we're not going to be subject to any fluctuations as a result of
Correct.
the tariffs.
Correct.
Second question is, on the Donegan, it looks like there's a contract discount of 56%.
Yep.
Is that something that you negotiated? The
No,
56?
that's if you go back and dig through their state bid list of items, that's their, for this amount of buying, that's the discount. If you look through WBs are between 50 and 60, depending on the items.
That's pre-approved with the state.
Oh, okay.
Those are pre-approved
can't-
discounts
we can't
through
change
the
those.
state.
Okay, so now again, this may be my world and not your world, but you got this as their, I guess, their best offer at this point. Can you go back to them and say, listen, WB Basin, we really want to work with you, but this number, you got to do a little bit better on this number. And can you not do that in your world either?
You really,
It's kind of already been done, right?
that's a great, thanks.
No?
Thanks for the help, Jeff.
You gotta take this one, Jeff.
No, I think that.
What do we have, right? I mean,
I think the other option we have is that you could You could go out and bid, you could bid it to these folks again, and there is an opportunity possibly to do better, but there's also an opportunity possibly the number stays the same. So the benefit of the state bid list is it's there, it's negotiated, it's their best rates. If you try to buy any of this.
No risk.
Take the WB Mason stuff. If we were to take that office furniture and go with one of the other vendors, nobody can touch their numbers. They do so much volume that their ultimate buy prices are always so much better.
So we don't have the ability to negotiate off of that number, you're saying? Okay.
I can tell you with Dunnigan, I gave him a number, I said, I need to hit this budget level. And he said, I will make it happen. And that's what I'm saying. He made it happen.
Okay.
Because if you did the math and some of the items there, it is actually considerably higher.
Needs a mic.
You need-
Oh, okay.
That's okay, none of that needs to be recorded anyways.
So are you looking for a vote on this, or?
Looking at a vote to authorize us to move ahead with WB Mason of a total of 187, 213.42, and Donegan at 166, 138.87, with the thought that we will finalize, to Chris's point, you know, we'll make sure we're getting the best number we can from them. And then with those authorizations, I will then work with Mr. Purple to get them the deposits that they need. You know, WB, as you can see, is looking for a third right now, and we've got to do that to lock it in. Donegan, I haven't gotten feedback from him yet about just how much he wants, trying to get that from him. Some of these folks are saying just send me an email. I want a little bit more than an email, you know, to lock it in. I'd rather some money change hands.
Right, I hear you.
So, you know, I want to get to that point with him, but I need you guys to authorize the 353, and then we'll go ahead and work within that authorization. And again, we'll come back later with bills to kind of bill against that, so you'll still see the bill when it comes in, and we'll send it in just like we are the rest of the invoices, so that you know what we're
Sure.
doing, and it'll be against a prior approval.
The one thing I would also note is that on Dunnigan, this also includes installation of all this equipment, and they're also going to dismantle and move the stuff that's going with us. So, that's nice.
Yeah, that's all at prevailing wage rates, so they've estimated an amount for that. So both of these are installed products, so basically we get the place to, you know, we've got to work with CTA to coordinate, and then they'll install this at the right time, and then these folks will also be responsible for any damage they do to the building, moving stuff in. That's where we come in.
Right.
We've had some experiences with some installers at times where they're terrible, from companies who shall remain nameless, but you don't know who their sub is, whether it's sourced from in-house or whether they sub it out. We just have to watch them to make sure that if there is any damage. And I will say WB, in one case where we had it, came out and they took care of everything. Any issues, they came out and took care of. So
Terrific.
they stand behind their install as much as they do their products, which is all you can ask for.
Does anybody have any further discussion? All right. Having there been none, I'd like to make a motion for $187,213.42 for WB Mason for the purchase of office furniture, and $166,138.87 to Dunnigan Systems for associated furniture for the building. That being seconded, have a vote. All those in favor? All those opposed? Vote is unanimous.
Wonderful. You wanna-
Okay, Jason? Wait, come on.
Checking the Celtics score. Sound looking good right now. I got down by 11. Yeah. Huh? Yeah. That's
All right.
22 the other
Uh,
night.
Next item is other items requiring procurement. So put this as a placeholder in case Mr. Lemieux had any other items to bring forward. My understanding is that at a future meeting, we're going to have to deal with the station alerting and the radios. Is there anything
As well
else?
as security and CCTV.
Okay. Is
So-
your expectation that that will be at the next meeting?
Yes, because I would like the sooner we can lock any of this in, the better off we are from, price increases that happen over the following year. Companies like Motorola do raise their prices once or twice a year. It just happens. The issue that we're having with, and we're looking into this right now, so station alerting is not specifically on the Massachusetts state bid list, but there may be an acceptable federal procurement that it falls under. Trying to research that right now. If something like station alerting isn't allowed to be procured like we just did with the furniture, we will have to bid it out because of its value. It's over $25,000. It's actually close to 50. And that's station alerting is obviously what happens when a call comes in and, you've tied the alerting system into the rest of the building for lights to go on and speakers to go off so that, the firemen can know that there's a call. So we're gonna do a little bit more research on that, but our plan is to come, again, keep this on the agenda because, some one-offs may come up too along the way that we need to talk about, but, those are the three big ones that are will be left to talk about, and I've got feelers out with the radio guy right now. I've got feelers out with the security system, which, for Signet, to get more detail, because while we got 16 pages from WB, I got one page with a number on it from Signet for $350,000, so I kind of want a little bit more backup from that. There was more than one page to the proposal, but so that we can see the pieces and parts and all the stuff that we're getting as well. So we'll keep that on.
Okay. And then the only other major line item I see here is computer equipment and network. Obviously, given the obsolescence of computer equipment and servers, I assume.
I had a brief conversation with Jeff about this today to confirm, but the town's IT person was involved
Okay.
in early discussions. We're gonna get them back in now that there's a contractor on board to make sure who's buying what, but we do have a line item for phones and for computers.
Okay. So the town just formed, or I guess reconstituted a committee called the Municipal Technology Committee, which I think is made up of, I think there's 5 members appointed by a bunch of different boards, Board of Selectmen, Library, and School Department. I would just, in the interest of transparency, figure out when you want to meet with them, or a representative from them, whether they come to our meeting, just to make sure you're getting, I guess, a well-vetted idea, nothing against our town IT director. I think he does a great job, but just, they formed that committee for a reason, so I'm really not up to speed on everything they do, but I know they did have some questions on the drawings for me that I was able to answer with Jeff's assistance, but just figure out when you want to involve them.
It's an important piece to tie together kind of the whole technology piece. You've got a lot of different systems in this building that will be required to talk to each other, so.
Yeah. And I just think it's the only building in town that's open every day, every hour of the year. So I think,
Yep.
critical infrastructure backup, et cetera, there's things beyond public safety that may be housed in there just for continuity of the town.
Mhm.
So let me know when you're ready and I'll get you in contact with the right folks. But,
Absolutely.
all right, anything else regarding procurement? So construction scheduling / phasing, I know you alluded to a diagram earlier. I cut Mr. Moorhead off, so I don't know which one of you want to walk through.
So I don't
this?
think, we're not really ready to walk through any of it because
Okay.
we got it today and we're meeting with them tomorrow where they're gonna present this
Okay,
as part of their pre-con. But I give it to you just because we received it, wanted you to, Jeff hit it on the head, it's a preview.
okay.
So any specific questions that you may have for what you see, please let us know and we'll make sure they get asked tomorrow, but we wanna give them a chance to talk to us about what their plan is.
And we definitely have the ability to manipulate their plan. So if we find that there's something we're not happy with, we're gonna tell them, you gotta fix this.
So are you vetting this plan at your meeting tomorrow, or have you already vetted it?
We just got it, so it's gonna be discussed. Like John said, we're gonna allow them to present it to us as to their logic as to why this is the way they wanna do it.
Okay.
And there may be very good reasons for all these things, and we all say, yeah, that sounds perfect. We also have to vet it with golf.
I was just gonna say, they've been made aware of the meeting and the plan, and
So they're invited, I think, Steve, right? They're, golf is invited, the management to the meeting. So, I expect they'll, when they come, there'll be some discussion specifically about how they use this during both phases.
Okay.
You can see definitely that they're, just first glance, we can see they're moving the proposed area of access, but they're also proposing to move the house right off the bat. So there's some changes from where we had envisioned it even, that we want to make sure that everybody gets on board with. If they are in fact able to get everybody on board with it, it may actually mean additional, quicker pace that they can move the project at, so.
Mr. Rooney?
So is tomorrow the only opportunity to talk to them about phasing? Because if you just got it yesterday, and we just got it this evening, that doesn't seem to give us very much time to digest it relative to the golf course operations.
I think the idea is that initially, we're gonna meet and talk about tomorrow, get their presentation, come up with any sort of questions that we might have at the time, and then we'll have time to review it and respond to this. Basically, every document the contractor sends to the design team in the OPM town is a submittal. And those submittals require, on our end, a certain period of time to review, to do our due diligence over that information. So we have the time to do whatever we need to do to make sure we've got our ducks in a row before we go back to them and say, here's what we'd like for you to do.
Right, but that isn't not an open timeframe. I
No,
mean, we've
it's
got
a
to,
very defined timeframe, and it's not necessarily, and these things aren't necessarily for your committee to decide. They're essentially for the design team, the OPM, and the town, your representative in the golf course to kind of meet, discuss staff, and make the decisions that need to happen on a much quicker pace than a monthly.
and I think that the point that I think Mr. Rooney's concern is, do the golf course people, or has the golf course management seen it? Do they have time to respond? The answer is, so far, no. They haven't had time to look at it and respond. But I think they also need to know that they've got a limited window, because this is the facing plan that everyone's gonna follow. So if they have comments to make, however we do it, we should encourage them to make them
Yeah, I think
sooner rather than later.
And I think the important thing is, this is just CTA's look at trying to accelerate the phasing plan that's already envisioned as part of the contract documents. They're trying to do it faster if they can, which is great, as long as they don't skip any steps and, all of that. So we want to hear them out, and I would see tomorrow leading to possibly some feedback that maybe gets delivered and discussed at a meeting the following week, And part of, one of the things, as we said on the agenda, is establishing when our job meeting is. We don't know that yet. That schedules have to be hashed out tomorrow. What's people's best day? Is it Tuesday mornings? Is it Thursday afternoons? We don't know that yet, but those meetings are going to start happening pretty quickly, so.
Mr. Rooney?
Again, I'm sorry, another question. When will dates be inserted on this diagram? In other words, dates as to when they're gonna relocate the clubhouse, because there's going then to have to be temporary trailers brought in so that we continue the golf. So in addition to the
think that
golf,
discussion
people not
starts-
seeing this.
Discussion starts tomorrow.
Yeah, and to the schedule piece, they also, and we're getting into the agenda for tomorrow's meeting. One of the agenda items is to talk about when they will have their preliminary project scheduled to us,
Okay.
which will include the dates of when they expect these turnovers to happen for the various phases.
Right.
And it's gonna take them a little while for them to generate this, because they have to generate it to some extent with some input from their subcontractors, which are getting up to speed and getting on the project. So there's a little bit of a ramp up that has to happen before we can go gangbusters.
Right, CTA only got their contract last week, so they likely haven't signed all their subcontracts yet.
But John, are you at the top of the pyramid, making sure everything is coordinated with the
Steve and I
golf?
both are.
with, getting in the temporary trailers, the temporary bathroom facilities, and all that? Who is keeping an eye on that before the construction, before they come in with the crane and start lifting up the golf course?
Oh, no, I mean, that's what we're here for, to make sure
Okay.
that for the town, we're good before anything just happens.
Okay.
I just wanted to say, something to talk about tomorrow, is that they're showing permanent golf course access through Woodward.
Right.
So that's
And
something to
that
talk about with the
has-
school,
and
or?
that has been part of our phasing plan that Steve actually worked on. I don't know if you want to talk about it, but that was put in place, I don't know, 6 months ago.
It's in the contract documents.
Yeah, and that was discussed at a town level. Steve spearheading that effort to determine how to get the golfers to the golf course, because this pathway off of Cordoville was not gonna be able to be used because of the construction activity.
Right. But that went through the school. School saw that and everything.
Yeah, yeah, there was a meeting I think you had with the school,
Superintendent, principal,
If they're fine with it, okay.
talk about phasing.
nothing simple, you know, keep the kids there, timing that they can enter.
Yep.
You know, to be clear, none of this is simple.
Yeah.
They show access.
Steve, you just need to get to a mic.
Depends how long you wanna talk.
The plan shows access through Woodward from the very beginning, and that's one of the first items that we have to work through, because you can't magically access the golf clubhouse from Woodward. There's some work to develop the access first. So, you know, there's some work to do here to talk through it, but as John described, it'll be a delightful conversation. They want to go faster than we have planned, so let's get in the room and figure out how to accomplish it, because it'll help the project.
Any other questions on phasing or scheduling? So my expectation going forward is that there'd be some sort of schedule presented. Yeah, I think you'll come with a construction schedule probably over the next couple of weeks. So while I don't expect this committee to meddle in task 1.1.1,
No, we're gonna
just
come
a
to you
general
with-
high-level timeline so that everyone understands
So
and
that you understand, so.
the layperson can also
Once
understand.
we have it, we'll give you an overview of the whole thing, but then I see us coming to these meetings to tell you what's gonna happen the next 4 weeks till we meet again. So that you can understand what's happened and then what's coming up, you know, in the next 4 weeks. Kind of like almost like a 6-week
Yeah.
picture every time you see us.
So before we move on from this one, John, there are 2 items that you had asked for, I guess, thoughts from the committee. One was just like how you're going to be taking thousands of construction photos to store, right? So those are technically public record. You know, I'm not asking, you don't have to have an answer tonight, but right, I think it also, if I were a resident of the town and I'm paying for this, I'd also just want to see what's going on there, because I might not be able to necessarily see what's going on for a long time until you start seeing stuff rise out of the dirt in the fall. So what is your plan for storing of those photos? And then 2, I think you had said most sites also have some sort of camera on
So
them.
we're seeing more and more, so first with the pictures. The way we will typically present you with photographs is on a monthly basis. You know, probably a dozen and a half. We will be taking dozens of photos a day. At the end of a project, we typically will turn over the photos on a drive, however you want them. We can do whatever you want from the standpoint of uploading, giving pictures to someone in the town to upload onto a website, whatever works best. But typically, the way we'll present them to you is in a monthly report. Here's what happened last month. Here's some photographs. We'll come in, we'll show, you know, we can work to, you know, you're all gonna see it, but once the building is up, you're not gonna see much of the inside. We can come with a presentation to say, here's what's happened. You can see it. They'll be able to broadcast it on television. That's fine. Anything more than that, you know, let me know what you want. I mean, typically, we don't turn over volumes of photos early on, because it's a lot of the same boring pictures. Here's a pipe, here's the pipe again, here's a picture of the pipe, you know, a little further up. But we can. The only issue is there's a lot of data, you know, that's gonna hold a lot. As far as the camera, we're doing one right now in Westboro, which is probably one of the slickest ones we've ever used. It's from a company called Ox Blue. The camera was about $5,000, and it's about $450 a month of a monitoring fee, and anybody can click on it any time and look and scroll backwards in 5 or 10 minute increments to see what the project looks like. You just drag and move backwards, and you can see what happened. What it requires, though, is a good place to mount it. So in Westboro, we're doing it, we have it on the school, focused right on the addition. So we have it at the school, and we're able to tap into the network of the school, because obviously everything's IP-based. So if we were here, we would need to look at doing it probably on the school roof as well, but you're gonna get a view of the side of the building in that case, unless there's no real good vantage point across the street.
At the end of the construction, if someone wants to see from day one to the end of construction, they can sit down and watch 360 days of construction? Is that what you're talking about?
It's stored somewhere, yeah.
Also, but I think, John, more important, you can go online and pull it up and say, I wonder what's happening at that site today.
Yeah,
And you
that's
see.
different than
It's not a
mounting it.
video per se, it's cameras, and it will store a picture every 10 minutes. So when you scroll backwards,
Oh.
you know, you've got it broken out. It's used a lot if there's a claim later on, what was the weather like on the day? It's not full, again, it's only as good as the vantage point you have it from. So, you know, obviously it'd be great to have it from the street for a site like this, because if you had it on the roof of the Woodward, you'd be looking at the back of the building. Still good, because you'd see the golf development and kind of all that happening. It is something we can do. I would say 20% of our jobs do it right now. So it's as much as somebody wants it, it's a fee, you know, and it's, for a year here, it would, you know, you're gonna spend $5,000 on a camera, and it would be, you know, let's round up $500 a month. So you're looking at times 14 months, you know, 7 plus 5, it's $12,000 investment. If you want it, it's there. It's something we can talk about, but, you know, we would wanna talk about that before, we would wanna decide on something like that for the next meeting. So if you want me to look at options, I could bring you some options for the next meeting.
Can we explore this for 1 second? Why would we, aside from curiosity and letting people see what's going on, you talked about it's available for claims. I mean, does it have serious value, or is that just an incidental value of it?
I
that
think
you
it's an
can?
incidental value, because it's only as good as what it's focused on. And once the building gets enclosed, can't see inside the building.
So it's not a good nanny cam then?
It's not a what?
Not a
No.
good nanny
No,
cam?
it isn't.
There is a light pole on the field that might be able to have a vantage
Tap
point.
into.
Yeah, it's possible.
Some people want to be able to click and see. You know, the way we'll typically handle that is, you know, when we do our monthly reports, we'll stand in the same 3 or 4 places and take the same 3 or 4 pictures month after month, so that if you want to hold them next to each other, you can see, here's the front of the building, month by month, and you can see how that progresses, or even day by day.
So just to confirm, Vertex will have a rep on site anytime construction is occurring, right?
Full time, yeah.
So, it seems like pictures
They
are
wanted-
enough.
They wanted the video, so we got them the camera. You know, they wanted the camera. So the salesman got to somebody and did the pitch, and then lo and behold, at the next meeting, we want this camera. I'm like, okay.
Does anyone want Mr. Lemieux to bring any camera proposals forward?
No.
Okay.
No, thank you.
Glad,
Good way to do it.
I don't even think that, just looking at the heads nodding, I would encourage you to figure out a way that we can, you know, whether it's thumb drives or external storage, figure out a way that we'll have access to all the photos. You know, going for, other than the one, you know, the 12 that you pick out, just, I think that's the way to document this in a very, very cheap manner.
And if I may, the photos that you're taking, I assume, are for your purposes to document progress on the job, so you can go back and look and see where maybe something went wrong, or, okay.
Right.
I think we're interested in the one from each vantage point each month. I mean, or whatever,
Yeah,
something
or
like that, something that we can
Periodic.
sell to the town every month,
Yep.
right?
Look, it's a lot of money, and people like seeing what their money's being spent on. Totally get it.
I use them, they're great, yeah, but I don't think we're there.
Okay. Our next item is construction progress meeting. So I think we've heard a lot of reference to the one that got scheduled for tomorrow, which is really the town officials, so basically the employees of the town and CTA, Context, and Vertex, so the main attendees. And then going forward, there's going to be some constituency of that group meeting on a weekly basis, it sounds like. I had raised this at the last meeting of, you know, whether it makes sense to have a building committee representative go to that, but also cautioning that we can't all show up because they are not gonna be posted under open meeting law. So I think the committee needs to make a decision of whether we're gonna appoint one member to represent and go to the meetings when he or she can attend. And that member would then be able to kind of report / validate anything that's represented to us. I've asked the opinions of Vertex, Context, and CTA of what value it does or doesn't have, having a building committee member there, and I've quite honestly got about as mixed of a bag as I could get. Given that I got no consensus amongst the three, I actually got very different answers. I'm just gonna put it out to the committee. I also will point out, obviously, our expectation is that both chiefs and town administrator have indicated that they're planning to go on a weekly basis. Obviously, if they're on vacation, they may send, one of their designees from their departments, but I have an opinion of what we should do, but, I just wanted to really open it up to the committee to see what we wanted to do, and should we decide, I'd like to actually ask, for a vote tonight of who that person should be.
First question is, what's our number? How many people, what's the highest number we can have before we have to have posted and, we start violating
One.
open meeting laws? One? Really?
Well, here's my rationale, right? So I would argue this committee has done everything to the T by the book, right? In, a very highly scrutinized project in a time when the town is going through a lot of change. What I don't want is let's just say you and I go to the meeting, right? We participate in that meeting, and then we come back and talk about that conversation in this meeting. We have then committed a potential violation. It's far-reaching, but, I think everyone knows I'm not a risk taker. So I would prefer we go with one or zero. Then there's absolutely nothing that could go wrong, and that person can act as the eyes and ears of the town. But there's a reason why we'll have posted monthly meetings, which is our next agenda topic, to really vet kind of, at, a higher level what's going on without getting into task 1.1.2.
Didn't we talk about that before? And I thought somebody had wanted to.
Well, I think a few people put their names forward, but I want to make sure we want to go forward with it, and then we can talk about who said individual is.
On that point, I'll just express an opinion, then be quiet. I don't think there's any need for anyone to be there, but certainly I think there's no harm in sending someone.
If I could take the opposite opinion, I think there's an absolute critical need for someone to be there in terms of this project, and just making sure the combined, or the competing interests, if you will, are well represented, and that be the abutters, the golf course people, the schools, someone who's got to, make sure that, because this is gonna be a coordination nightmare, I think. Steve, you didn't say nightmare, but I think it's gonna be a coordination, a lot of hurdles that this get done, and the sentiment of the neighborhood, the sentiment of the golfers, and the sentiment of the town meeting really needs to be present at these meetings. So I do think it's important for someone to be there, and just to keep that, that theme in front of everyone's mindset.
Mr. Wood, any thoughts?
I agree with Mr. Rooney. I thought we had talked about it before, and I agreed then. That'd be nice to have somebody in.
I agree with Mr. Officer. I think that, I don't really totally feel the need, but I think that if somebody does want to go, it could be beneficial as well.
Anything to add, Mr. Officer?
No.
Mr. Moorhead?
No, I'm fine. I don't know that we have to go, but I don't think it would hurt for us to be there. I think these guys are a representation, and that's what they're doing for us as a town, so I don't think we need to be there, but it wouldn't hurt, and I don't want to be it.
Okay. Mr. Goodney?
For a living.
I think it's a good idea to have somebody there. And if we do pick somebody, to have like an alternate as well, in case, it is summertime, in case they can't make it, there's a backup.
So Mr. Lyons?
No, I agree that there's a value to have one of the members here at the meetings.
I would just echo everything Mr. Rooney said. He said it very eloquently, so I'm not gonna, I think there's no harm in sending one of us. I would argue against sending more than one of us for the reasons already articulated. So I heard a consensus unless someone disagrees on that. So I think what we need to do is make a, well, not a majority. Does anyone want to make a motion that we appoint someone, then we can make a second motion to actually make the appointments, and I don't think it's a bad idea. I think Pete said about a potential alternate, as long as they're in tune and only one shows up.
Right, it sounds to me like there ought to be maybe 2 people appointed, and only one of them will be at any meeting. That way they can coordinate among themselves, hey, I've got to be out of town this day, can you go? As long as there's 2 people and they cover the meeting by one of them only, then I think we accomplish our goal.
All right, so I will make a motion that the committee appoint 2 members for the purposes of having one attend each regularly scheduled weekly construction progress meeting. Is there a second?
A second.
Seconded by Mr. Goodney. Is there any further discussion? All right, all those in favor? Any opposed? All right, that carries unanimously. Now, Mr. Moorhead took himself out of the running. Does anyone, I know Mr. Lyons had previously indicated he was willing and had the capacity in his schedule and had sat through these meetings before in Weston. So is there anyone, so I assume nothing has changed? Is there anyone else that has a desire to assist Mr. Lyons with this task?
I thought Mr. Goodney said he was, no? I'm not trying to put you on the spot, I honestly thought you said that.
I mean, my schedule, I work 2 days or 2 nights, so a lot of times I'm off during the day. So if I can be of
I
assistance.
assume these meetings will be during the day?
Yes.
Probably, usually in the morning, like an 8 o'clock meeting or
Typically in
something?
the mornings, but
Most typically
given
mornings.
the parties involved, it's always interesting to try and set a time when nobody else has another meeting.
Right.
that
I usually
regularly
think of these as
occurs.
going
part
up
of
at
the fun
7:30,
tomorrow.
8 o'clock. Yeah, okay.
Calendar's out. What
Mr.
works?
Rooney?
My name into the hat as well, because as long as I have enough advance notice, I can usually juggle my schedule.
Once they're set, they're gonna be.
Once they're set, they're
If
set.
we come up tomorrow with Tuesdays at 9, they're Tuesdays at 9.
Okay.
And if it's not Tuesday at 9, it's usually we'll cancel this week. Sometimes in the beginning of a project like this, it's necessary to meet every week, but then all of a sudden we downshift a little bit because you're waiting for submittals and shop drawings, and we don't want to kill somebody with a meeting just
So
to have
these
a
are,
meeting.
these are weekly, every week?
Every
Oh,
week.
yeah.
I'm gonna take my name out.
I was,
It's easy, doesn't it?
We talk
too
about
much.
all
Once we
the-
get going, it's
Too
that's,
It's too much.
yeah.
We talk about all the minutiae.
Sorry,
Yeah.
I think we had,
but I do think it's important.
But I think it's important.
If this weekly meeting's gonna happen every week,
Is there anyone else that wants to either put their name in or recommend another committee member other than Mr. Goodney or Mr. Lyons? All right, would you like to make a motion, Mr. Rooney, then?
I would move that Mr. Lyons and Mr. Goodney be appointed by this committee to attend the weekly meetings, one of them attend weekly meetings on behalf of this committee.
Seconded by Mr. Wood. Any further discussion? All those in favor? Any opposed? All right, motion carries unanimously.
And
All right.
I just want to add one thing. If either of you gentlemen find that it's too much, raise a hand. We'll get you out of that and put someone else on it.
Yeah.
In case you end up being overcommitted. I don't want to feel like you're put upon. Thank you.
Okay, thank you both for stepping forward and volunteering. The next one will be probably music to Mr. Rooney's ears, but we're going to set our meeting schedule through the end of 2018.
Perfect.
Now, I will say, we agreed on the first Monday of every month through the end of the year, 6:30, most likely this room unless it's been reserved for some other needs, but I'm going to get the reservations in tomorrow, so I think this room works well for the public to have access to our meetings and obviously the video. There are going to be 2 conflicts that I'll walk through in a second, but this doesn't mean that there won't be instances where we aren't meeting in that 30-day period. So remember our policy, should a change order come up that's greater than $10,000, regardless of how small, large, how it may appear the big overall project, this committee and at least 5 members need to vote on passing that. So within open meeting law, so we'll have 48, we need 48 business hours, we'll probably be posting a meeting, assuming I can actually get 5 people in a room to move certain things forward. So the goal is to meet monthly, have a very regular cadence similar to the agenda we have tonight with pictures coming, budget updates, et cetera. But, hopefully we're not meeting in between, but I think we'd be naive to think that there won't be something that comes up along the way. So with that being said, I'm going to propose that we set our meeting schedule, and I will post this both for the committee, but also on the town website once we agree on it. Monday, June 4th would be the first Monday. The first Monday of July is July 2nd. I assume no one has any interest in meeting in and around July 4th. So what I would propose is we meet Monday, July 9th, so it'd be the following week, but sticking with the theme of Mondays. The only thing we all need to be aware of, if for whatever reason we're not going to get a quorum at any of these meetings, we are going to need to reschedule it for within 24 to 48 hours of these meetings, especially where we're following to the second Monday, because we have to make the payment by the 15th of the month. And obviously the town needs a few days to cut the check. These aren't going to be the smallest checks that the town has issued over the years. So I think we also owe it to the community as appointed members of the committee to really be spending the time to vet what's being brought in front of us and not, rubber stamping. So everyone good with July 9th? Monday, August 6th. Then we go into September. Same issue, Labor Day is the first Monday. So what I would propose is that we meet on Monday, September 10th. The alternatives on both the July 4th, well, not on July 4th, but on Labor Days, we could move it to later in that week too. But I kind of like the theme of Mondays unless anyone has any issues.
Jason, just to,
September 9th, Jason, is that what you said?
10th.
10th.
Just, it doesn't really matter at all. I just want, for your information, I won't be here on the 10th. You don't need me to be here,
Yeah.
just so you know.
Yeah. Mr. Goodney's pointing out that it is a Jewish holiday.
On September 10th?
Yeah. So are there any objections to meeting? Okay. So we'll keep it for the 10th. We can revisit the schedule, but I'd like to try to keep it as,
3 months away,
yeah. Then we'll go to Monday, October 1st, Monday, November 5th, and then Monday, December 3rd. And then we'll deal with 2019 in a little bit. But is everyone comfortable with that for now?
Yes.
Okay. No motions are needed on that. I do see some members of the public. Any public comment? Mr. Litt?
Tim Litt, 148 Woodland Road. I was just, I know you said you didn't have any appetite in continuous pictures, but it did occur to me that there is an inexpensive way to do that. I know they are popular, and that is you're buying a security system with outdoor cameras. So you could put one of them up on a pole and simply, if you buy it early, have it take a picture every 10 minutes and you're done.
Okay.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, Louise Barron, 11 Sadie Hut Lane. I have a few concerns and a question. One of the concerns is the traffic patterns. I'm envisioning something that looked like absolute chaos. There are fire trucks coming out of the building, the new building. There's police cars coming out. It's a peak time. You've got a line of cars coming down from Main Street all the way down 85. Maybe you have some buses coming the other way. I mean, how is this going to work? We're not enlarging 85 at all. So to me, I see nothing but chaos with emergency vehicles, buses, cars. How is this going to work? How does a emergency vehicle exit from the building when there's opposing traffic coming and it has to get to, let's say, Main Street or down Main Street or through 85? I don't know how this is going to me, it's just many accidents waiting to happen. do I not see something here, or?
So, this was a topic of extended discussion at the planning board. So I think there's a few things, is the planning board required that this committee, through our consultants, hire a traffic engineer that studied the traffic patterns, not only of what's going in and out of the public safety complex today, right? So how many times the police cars come in and out during a daily shift, how many times the engines come in and out, but also looking at the Woodward traffic during a peak school period.
Yep.
And also for the golf. And what they concluded is they proposed a series of signage, which I would then say the planning board added on additional signage. And what you're gonna end up with is, I'll call it a box area, where you can't stop in front of, very similar to what we have over there.
Right.
The road is wider down there, but also this traffic engineer took into account the Main Street project that would be basically concluding at the same time, where you would have extra turning lanes up at the actual intersection. So the expectation is that the traffic would not back up like we're all used to today. So that's what they concluded in coming to their conclusions. I can say, my view is the planning board was very diligent on what they did in that. That was probably their single largest concern, was the traffic in that area. And they were very diligent and required certain studies. So that's, I guess, how I would respond. I know that came up at town meeting. I know there's a few other people that have approached me about that since the comment came up at town meeting. That's what they concluded. So I think there would be, if we went against what planning board said we should or shouldn't do, I think, right, we're creating natural additional costs that may or may not be necessary.
Well, we'll see, I guess. Another item I was concerned about is oversight. I don't think I can stress oversight enough on this project, which is very, very large. Who is checking the GC? Who is making sure that the invoices that are being submitted have been delivered, the services have been rendered? I mean, I think a great idea would be a construction audit periodically, just to make sure that.
So,
Yeah,
that's us.
So, I'm just gonna give a very brief, and then I'm gonna turn it over to you, because you have a lot more detail. So, because of the size of the project, Mass General Law required us to hire an owner's project manager. No matter how competent you think we are or aren't up here, we were required to hire a third party. Vertex is who we hired based on basically a request for qualification. So we basically vetted them based on their experience with other towns doing the same thing. Every month, they get all the invoices. So all the invoices come into the town administrator or other departments. Mr. Purple takes that and sends it to Mr. Lemieux. And I'll let him walk through what he does to get comfortable. And then he issues us a letter on his letterhead that says, I've reviewed these services have been provided, and you should pay. And there have been situations already where they've said, don't pay it. And actually never got brought forward to the committee because they said, don't pay it. So I'll let you touch on just what you do to get comfortable, but also address Ms. Barron's comment on what you did to get comfortable that the general contractor, right, just walk through the pre-qualification process that we went through.
Sure, so we'll start with the money part first, and then we'll go back to that. So basically, the bid that came in for this is about $15 million. They won't just send us a one-page invoice. The invoice for this job will be probably about 30 pages long. And the project will be broken into every filed sub-bid section. There'll be a section for plumbing, for HVAC, for electrical. It's our job, along with the architect in the beginning, to make sure that that detail that goes into that, it's called the schedule of values, is detailed enough so that when we get, at the end of a month, their request for payment, it comes in draft form, and we sit with them and go through it line by line to see everything that they're suggesting. And if we disagree with it, we have it out right there at the meeting and explain, well, I want to be paid 100% for this. Well, you're not done with this line item yet. We come to an agreement. They then make the invoice final. The architect signs off on it. The owner's project manager signs off on it. So when it comes to this group, there is no, it's been vetted twice already by both of us. As far as the contractor, we've both worked with the contractor in the past. We just finished a similar building $15 million building with the same contractor in Situate, with the same project management team, with very good record of, good bookkeeping, good records, good rapport as far as what they billed for, if we disagreed, them fixing it. There were very few disputes on items that, I don't think there was, let me back up, I don't think there was any incident where they disagreed so hard that they were upset. At the end of the day, contractor will always try to get a little bit more, and we as the owner side are always trying to push back a little bit to keep a little bit more in our pocket if we can. At the end of the day, we want to be what's fair. We want them to be paid a fair amount for the work they've done. And if we've done a good job with the schedule of values, as an example for electrical, we will break the building out by floor, by area, so that it's not just rough electric, and then we're fighting over, well, are they 50% or 60% done? We break that rough electric into different categories so that it's easy for us to say, did you do the first floor north? If you did, great. We can agree to that, and we break it into, we gonna say something?
Yeah, I was just gonna throw in a little bit of a comment that it should be pointed out that we don't pay on a time and materials basis. We pay on a percentage complete. So they bid a certain amount for the job, as John was saying, it's gonna be broken down to schedule of values. Typically, no line item is more than $25,000, which is why it gets so long. And then each one of those, we track percentage to completion. So, we're not going over invoices to see how many bags of concrete they brought to the site, because that's their business. We're just concerned about actually, is that concrete that they have to do for the whole job, what level of completion is that at? 5%, 10, 20, 100, and we pay towards completion. Once they've satisfied us that it's been complete, then we'll recommend payment. And in fact, throughout the whole project, there's a retainage that's kept back. Out of each payment, we keep a little bit back, so that at the end of the project, when it's substantially complete, the town moves in, we have essentially a big bucket of money that can be
5%.
drawn on to go through punch list items
Sure.
that are remaining at the end. So
I
there's,
built a house, and renovated kitchen, so I'm sort of familiar with it. And that takes me to one last thing, and I won't take up any more time. Have you done any of the purchasing for kitchen equipment or any of that kind of thing at this point?
all those items are within the general contractor's scope, so I guarantee you they haven't purchased anything yet, but they will be submitting shop drawings and product submittals on every single component of the project that have to be reviewed by us, reviewed by the OPM, and in some cases reviewed by the town.
Will that be in these meetings as well?
At the project meetings, the weekly
Project
project meetings.
meetings.
Well, the conversation, if there's any issue, will take place at the weekly project meeting, but those reviews will happen outside of a meeting. They will happen directly between the contractor, the architect, and the OPM.
So that we can't give any input as far as residents are concerned?
At this point, everything's been specified and directed to the contractor. If we want to make a change based upon the specifications that were put into the bid documents, we would then have to execute a change order for that. But all of those components that the owner would essentially have access to or interaction with, like kitchen equipment, colors, things like that, all of that has been discussed in prior meetings with staff, with the fire, with the police, determining what specific things they want in the station for appliances and other things like that. So that's been gone over pretty thoroughly, I think, to this point.
All right, thank you.
I don't see any other public comment. Is there any other business the committee wants to conduct? Make a motion to adjourn?
Second.
Seconded by Mr. Goodney. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye, we're adjourned. Thank you.